Oh, yeah. What happened is that Shirley brought me to Hollywood to do Gambit, but her thing she was doing overran, and I was a week on my own in Hollywood, and I'd never been to America.
At 93, Michael Caine has reached the point where awards, fame, and box office success matter far less than the people who stood beside him. After more than 7 decades in film, he has worked with legends, shared private moments with global stars, and watched many of his closest friends disappear with time. Through old interviews, career stories, and unforgettable moments behind the cameras, we uncover the friendships, lessons, and acts of kindness that Caine never forgot. From James Bond icons to Hollywood royalty, these are the 5 people he loved most. Roger Moore, the friend who made life lighter. Roger Moore was never simply another famous actor in Michael Caine's remarkable journey through Hollywood. He was one of those rare people whose friendship existed long before awards, headlines, and legendary reputations became the focus of every conversation. Both men belonged to a remarkable generation of British actors who transformed international cinema, while never completely losing touch with the ordinary lives they came from. They understood success because they had once understood struggle. Although they became household names around the world, they never measured each other by trophies, salaries, or who happened to have the biggest film at the box office. Their friendship rested on something much stronger than professional achievement. It was built on mutual respect, endless laughter, and the comfort that comes from knowing someone who expects nothing more from you than your company. Their careers followed different paths, yet somehow those differences strengthened their bond instead of creating distance. Roger Moore became forever linked with James Bond, carrying himself with effortless elegance, polished charm, and an easy smile that audiences adored. Michael Caine, meanwhile, built his reputation through grounded performances in films like Alfie, The Ipcress File, and The Italian Job, creating characters that felt relatable rather than glamorous. One represented sophistication, while the other embodied working-class realism. Instead of competing, they admired what made each other unique. Away from cameras and premieres, they were simply 2 friends enjoying dinners, holidays, social gatherings, and long conversations about life. During the filming of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, Caine spent time living near Moore on the French Riviera, a period he would later remember as one of the happiest chapters of his career. Those memories had little to do with scripts or filming schedules. They centered on friendship, laughter, and the simple joy of sharing everyday moments with someone who never made fame feel important. That easygoing spirit explained why Roger Moore remained so beloved by nearly everyone who crossed his path. Audiences knew him as the smooth secret agent capable of saving the world without breaking a sweat. But the people who actually worked beside him discovered someone even more impressive. Moore possessed the rare ability to ease tension without making a scene. Film productions often involved exhausting days, endless waiting, and stressful moments when nothing seemed to go according to plan. Somehow, Roger always sensed when morale was slipping. A quick joke, an amusing story, or a playful comment could change the entire mood within minutes. Crew members remembered that he spoke to everyone with genuine respect, whether they were directors, lighting technicians, makeup artists, assistants, or young runners carrying coffee across the set. He learned names, looked people in the eye, and made newcomers feel as though they truly belonged. That mattered deeply to Michael Caine, because he had grown up understanding what it felt like to be overlooked. He admired people who never let success turn into some kind of arrogance, you know? Roger's humor was never something built for interviews or for publicity. It just showed up as the person he actually was. He could laugh at himself just as easily as he laughed with others, and he refused to act like some sort of untouchable cinema legend. His confidence came from being at ease with himself, not from needing constant applause, and that realness made every friendship feel almost weightless. As the years rolled on, both men saw their generation quietly drift away. Jobs that once seemed endless started to become a bundle of recollections. while the same familiar faces appeared less and less at premieres and get-togethers. Roger Moore looked at his later years with that same grace and lightness, the same humor that had always been there. Even when the health stuff became harder to ignore, he rarely allowed it to swallow up the people around him. He kept choosing to make others smile instead of reaching out for sympathy. When he passed on in 2017, the world mourned the loss of one of cinema's most recognizable names. But Michael Caine seemed to feel something quieter and, honestly, more personal. He wasn't just missing James Bond. He was missing all those decades of conversations, meals shared without ceremony, private jokes said under breath, and that steady feeling of having someone nearby who had seen so much of his own path too. Grief kind of shifts as you grow older, because every old friend keeps pieces of your earlier self. When they go, those memories suddenly feel less like yours to touch again, and more like they're locked behind glass. Little did Michael Caine know, the next friendship on his list had begun long before either man became an international icon, and it would grow into one of Hollywood's most enduring bonds. Sean Connery, brothers before they became legends. Long before Sean Connery became the face of James Bond, and long before Michael Caine earned Academy Awards and worldwide recognition, they were simply two young men chasing a dream that often seemed impossible. Their friendship did not begin under bright lights or on expensive film sets. It began during a period when both were still searching for steady work and wondering whether acting would ever become more than a distant ambition. They shared working-class roots that shaped how they viewed success for the rest of their lives. Connery grew up in Edinburgh, taking demanding jobs that included delivering milk and polishing coffins before discovering acting. Caine, raised in South London, endured years of tiny roles, endless auditions, and financial uncertainty while trying to escape the limitations of his background. They crossed paths during the early years of their careers, around the time of the touring production of South Pacific, when neither could have imagined what the future would hold. At that stage, they were not celebrities. They were simply performers trying to survive another week in a profession filled with rejection. Connery was often told he looked too rugged, too Scottish, or simply too unusual for conventional leading roles. Caine faced different obstacles. His Cockney accent and ordinary appearance convinced many people that he could never become a traditional leading man. Yet those setbacks created an unspoken understanding between them. They both knew what it felt like to stand outside the gates, while others seemed to enter with ease. Years later, when one became the defining James Bond and the other grew into one of Britain's most respected actors, their rise felt almost unbelievable, even to themselves. Their friendship had been built before fame arrived, making it stronger than anything success could later provide. That shared history made it especially satisfying when they finally appeared together in The Man Who Would Be King in 1975. Director John Huston had dreamed of making the adventure for years, imagining different pairs of famous actors before eventually bringing together Connery and Caine. The wait proved worthwhile because audiences were not simply watching two talented performers reading lines. They were watching lifelong friends whose trust had been earned over decades. As former soldiers searching for fortune in a distant land, their characters joked, argued, challenged one another, celebrated impossible victories, and ultimately paid the price for limitless ambition. Every exchange carried an authenticity that could never have been manufactured. Their chemistry felt effortless because neither actor needed to pretend there was history between them. That history already existed. They had survived lean years, career disappointments, international fame, and the pressures that came with becoming two of Britain's biggest stars. On screen, Connery brought commanding confidence, while Caine balanced him with intelligence, humor, and quiet practicality. Off-screen, the friendship remained just as lively. They loved teasing each other, competing on the golf course, and spending time within a close circle of famous friends that included Sidney Poitier. One memorable disagreement over golf even left Connery and Poitier briefly annoyed with Caine. proving that genuine friendships were never perfect. Real friends argued, laughed, forgave each other, and moved forward. That honesty made their connection believable both on and off the screen. Critics praised their performances, and the film gradually earned recognition as one of the finest adventures ever produced, largely because audiences believed every word exchanged between its two leading men. Behind every dramatic scene stood years of trust that no screenplay could ever invent. As time went on, Sean Connery became one of those most recognizable faces in cinema. But Michael Caine rarely ever thought of him first as James Bond. He kept remembering the man who spoke honestly, chuckled easily, and just wouldn't let himself get overwhelmed by his own reputation. Connery had this steady confidence that didn't really need constant hovering or constant notice. He could step into a room full of people and somehow command respect without having to muscle his way into every single conversation. That calm assurance really impressed Caine because it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like knowing exactly who he was, rather than chasing approval. Both men seemed to understand how fame can twist personalities, nudging actors into polished alternatives of themselves, instead of staying real and quietly unruly. Connery fought that kind of pressure his whole career. Even when he eventually stepped away from acting and chose a far more private life, the friendship between them never leaned on premieres or the next big film. It sat on decades of shared moments, going back to the days before either of them had a spotlight pinned on. And when Connery passed away in 2020, Michael Caine didn't just lose another legendary actor. He lost one of the last people who remembered him before the rest of the world knew the name Michael Caine. That sort of friendship isn't something you can rebuild later, because it belongs to a version of yourself that has already moved on. Fame tends to ring people around with admirers, co-workers, and business associates, but not that many stay who can remember the shaky years before success ever showed up. Laurence Olivier, the giant who never belittled him. By the time Michael Caine found himself sharing the screen with Laurence Olivier, he was already an established actor with several acclaimed performances behind him. Even so, working alongside Olivier felt different from anything he had experienced before. Laurence Olivier was not simply another respected performer. He was regarded as the very definition of classical British acting, a man whose reputation had been built through decades of extraordinary performances on both stage and screen. Younger actors often spoke his name with a mixture of admiration and nervousness because he represented the highest standard many believed they could never reach. Michael Caine came from a completely different world. Raised in South London with a Cockney accent that many critics once considered unsuitable for leading roles, he represented a new generation of British actors who relied less on theatrical polish and more on natural honesty. Their worlds collided in the 1972 mystery film Sleuth, creating one of cinema's most fascinating acting partnerships. Olivier portrayed Andrew Wyke, an intelligent but manipulative mystery writer who delighted in psychological games. Caine played Milo Tyndall, the younger man lured into Wyke's elaborate contest of pride, deception, and revenge. Almost every scene depended entirely on the chemistry between these two men. There was no large supporting cast to hide behind, and no action sequences to distract audiences. Every conversation, every pause, every glance had to hold the viewer's attention. For Caine, the challenge was enormous. He was not simply acting beside a legend for one memorable scene. He had to stand opposite Olivier from beginning to end, matching him line for line while remaining completely believable. Trying to imitate Olivier would have guaranteed failure. Instead, Caine trusted his own instincts, responding with the quiet confidence and understated realism that had already become his trademark. The contrast between Olivier's theatrical precision and Caine's natural style created an irresistible tension that elevated every scene. Rather than competing against one another, they brought out the very best in each other's performances, transforming what could have been an intimidating experience into one of the defining moments of Caine's career. What impressed Michael Caine even more than Laurence Olivier's extraordinary talent was the discipline that supported it. Many people assumed greatness eventually made hard work unnecessary, but Olivier proved exactly the opposite. Every day he arrived fully prepared, knowing his lines, understanding every emotional beat, and treating each scene with complete seriousness. Decades of success had not made him careless or complacent. Instead, experience had deepened his respect for the trade itself, Watching that dedication firsthand taught Caine a lesson he would not forget. Talent might open the first door, but discipline was what kept it from shutting again year after year. The two actors approached their work from completely different traditions, though. Olivier came from the classical theater world, where voice, physical transformation, careful technique, and formal training shaped every performance. Caine belonged to a newer school of screen acting built around subtle expressions, quiet delivery, and emotional truth. On paper, those approaches seemed incompatible. In practice, they complemented each other beautifully. Their differences created dramatic electricity instead of conflict. Just as important, Olivier never used his towering reputation to diminish the younger actor standing beside him. He allowed Caine room to challenge him, to respond naturally, and to build scenes together rather than simply following orders. That generosity carried special meaning in an industry long influenced by class distinctions, expensive educations, and polished accents. Here stood a young man from a working-class London neighborhood performing as an equal beside Britain's most celebrated theatrical actor. The success of Sleuth proved that audiences were ready to embrace both traditions. Remarkably, both Olivier and Caine received Academy Award nominations for their performances, a rare achievement for a film driven almost entirely by two actors sharing the screen. The recognition celebrated not only their individual performances, but also the extraordinary balance they created together, showing that mutual respect could produce something neither performer could have achieved alone. The lessons Michael Caine carried away from Sleuth extended far beyond a single film. Laurence Olivier demonstrated that every new project demanded the same commitment regardless of previous accomplishments. Yesterday's awards could not perform today's scenes. Every production required fresh preparation, renewed focus, and complete professionalism. Caine embraced that philosophy throughout a career that eventually stretched beyond 7 decades. Whether starring in major blockbusters or modest independent productions, he developed a reputation for arriving prepared, learning every line thoroughly, adjusting quickly to directors, and treating every role with equal respect. That practical discipline became one of the foundations of his remarkable longevity. Yet perhaps the greatest gift Olivier offered had nothing to do with acting techniques at all. Despite his immense reputation, he never made Michael Caine feel like an outsider who did not belong. He challenged him through excellence rather than intimidation. Olivier easily could have relied on his legendary status to dominate every conversation and every rehearsal, but instead he created an atmosphere where collaboration flourished. Laurence Olivier proved that greatness could still be generous, but the next person offered Caine something different, an invitation that helped carry him from British success into Hollywood's inner circle. Shirley MacLaine, the woman who opened Hollywood. When people think about Shirley MacLaine, they usually picture an Oscar-winning actress with boundless energy, unforgettable charisma, and a personality unlike anyone else in Hollywood. Yet for Michael Caine, she represented something even more meaningful. She was one of the first major American stars who believed in him before Hollywood had fully decided he belonged there. By the middle of the 60s, MacLaine was already an established force in American cinema, known not only for her performances, but also for her influence within the industry. She had earned the respect of directors, producers, and audiences alike, meaning her opinions carried real weight. At the same time, Michael Caine was becoming one of Britain's most exciting new actors, thanks to films like Zulu and The Ipcress File. Although his reputation was growing quickly at home, Hollywood still viewed him as an interesting newcomer rather than a proven international leading man. Everything began to shift when Shirley MacLaine reportedly watched The Ipcress File and decided she wanted Caine to star opposite her in Gambit. That decision changed far more than the casting of one film. It gave Caine an important opportunity to introduce himself to American audiences at precisely the right moment. As Gambit entered production, Alfie exploded into an international success, making it seem as though every door in Hollywood suddenly began opening at once. MacLaine later joked that she had helped launch his career, and although she said it with characteristic humor, there was genuine truth behind the remark. Before studios fully recognized his value, she had already seen it. That kind of belief carries a unique significance because it arrives before success makes confidence easy. Once someone becomes famous, countless people claim they always recognized the talent. The individuals who actually take a chance before everyone else sees the potential are remembered differently. Michael Caine never forgot that Shirley MacLaine belonged to that rare group. She did not wait for Hollywood to approve him first. She trusted her own instincts, and that early confidence became one of the most important gifts she ever gave him. Their partnership in Gambit demonstrated exactly why Shirley MacLaine believed he was the right choice. The story revolved around Caine's character, an intelligent thief convinced he had created the perfect plan to steal a priceless treasure. Everything appeared carefully organized until MacLaine's character entered the picture and quietly dismantled every expectation. At first, the audience sees her almost entirely through Caine's imagination, appearing calm, obedient, and perfectly suited to his carefully designed scheme. Then reality takes over. Her character reveals herself to be witty, independent, unpredictable, and impossible to control, completely overturning both his assumptions and the audience's. That clever structure allowed MacLaine to surprise viewers while constantly challenging Caine's tightly controlled performance. Their chemistry depended on contrast. Caine brought precision, dry humor, and visible frustration whenever events slipped beyond his control. MacLaine answered with spontaneity, curiosity, warmth, and endless unpredictability. Together, they created a rhythm that kept every scene lively without either actor overpowering the other. Both received Golden Globe nominations for their performances, while the film itself earned several Academy Award nominations, confirming that audiences appreciated the unique balance they created together. Beyond the film, Caine admired qualities in MacLaine that had little to do with acting. She possessed an endless curiosity about life itself. Conversations with her rarely stayed focused on films or celebrity gossip for very long. She could move naturally from discussing travel to history, spirituality, family, books, aging, or whatever unusual subject happened to capture her imagination that day. Her willingness to ask thoughtful questions and genuinely listen to other people's answers made spending time with her feel unpredictable in the best possible way. Michael Caine loved stories, observations, and intelligent conversation, making their personalities surprisingly compatible despite their many differences. Their friendship proved that lasting connections do not require people to think alike or approach life the same way. Sometimes mutual respect grows strongest between two people whose differences continually keep each other interested. What makes Michael Caine's friendship with Shirley MacLaine especially remarkable is how long it endured. They first worked together during the 60s, a period when Hollywood itself was undergoing dramatic change. The old studio system was starting to fade. International productions were showing up more, and a younger batch of actors was kinda reshaping what viewers thought a leading performer should bring. Caine and MacLaine both managed to adjust to those shifts without losing the parts that made them stand out in the first place. And nearly 4 decades after Gambit, they found their way back together on screen in Bewitched in 2005. At that point, they weren't really rising anymore, not the way it used to mean. They had turned into lasting icons, the kind whose careers have already influenced one generation, then another of actors who came after. Their reunion felt deeper than just another shared acting line. It linked 2 different Hollywood periods, through a friendship that stuck around despite changing tastes, evolving audiences, and decades of personal changes. the kind that don't always look glamorous from the outside. Shirley MacLaine never treated age like a stop sign. She kept going, acting, writing books, dabbling in unusual perspectives, and asking questions that a lot of people either were afraid of or just too at ease to even bother raising. Whether everyone agreed with every belief of hers honestly mattered less than the stubborn drive to stay receptive, to keep trying new things. Michael Caine seemed to share that same refusal to get boxed in by nostalgia. Even late, he welcomed new directors, fresh obstacles, and younger collaborators with real enthusiasm. Together, they showed that getting older doesn't have to mean shrinking or going quiet. And among the friendships on Michael Caine's list, Shirley MacLaine stood for something a bit singular. Roger Moore gave warmth, Sean Connery reflected lifelong brotherhood, and Laurence Olivier felt like mentorship made tangible. Shirley MacLaine helped welcome Michael Caine into Hollywood, but the final man gave him a lesson so simple and so strange that Caine repeated it for the rest of his life. John Wayne, the legend with two warnings. To Michael Caine's generation, John Wayne was never just another successful actor. He represented something much larger than Hollywood itself. He was the face of the American West, the symbol of quiet strength, and the man whose walk, voice, and commanding presence had become part of movie history. Long before Michael Caine ever imagined a career in film, he had watched Wayne on the big screen while sitting inside crowded cinemas in London. Those afternoons offered a temporary escape from a childhood shaped by poverty, uncertainty, and the hardships of post-war Britain. Caine grew up believing stars like John Wayne existed in a different universe, one far beyond the reach of a working-class boy named Maurice Micklewhite. He served in the Korean War, spent years struggling through tiny acting roles, and repeatedly heard that his Cockney accent would prevent him from becoming a leading man. Every rejection reminded him how distant Hollywood seemed. Then, everything changed. Following the success of Alfie, Caine found himself meeting one of the biggest icons in world cinema. That single encounter carried enormous emotional weight because it marked more than another celebrity introduction. It symbolized the incredible distance he had traveled. The heroes he had once admired from the darkness of a movie theater now recognized him as a fellow actor. Yet John Wayne did not greet the younger performer with grand speeches about greatness or dramatic lessons about becoming a star. Instead, he spoke in the straightforward, practical style that perfectly matched the image audiences had always associated with him. His advice was short, memorable, and rooted in experience rather than showmanship. The first lesson Wayne shared became one of Michael Caine's favorite stories for the rest of his life. He encouraged the younger actor to speak in a lower voice, slow his delivery, and avoid saying more than necessary. At first glance, the advice sounded almost too simple to matter, but the more Caine reflected on it, the more he understood its brilliance. John Wayne recognized that true screen presence often comes from restraint rather than constant movement or loud performances. Audiences naturally pay closer attention to someone who remains calm while everyone else competes for attention. Confidence rarely needs to announce itself. It reveals itself through patience, measured words, and complete control. That philosophy fit perfectly with the style Michael Caine was already beginning to develop. Instead of relying on exaggerated emotion, he became known for subtle reactions, careful timing, and the ability to communicate enormous feeling with only a glance or a slight change in tone. Throughout films like Get Carter, The Man Who Would Be King, Educating Rita, and later Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, Caine repeatedly demonstrated that authority could exist without shouting. His characters often became the calmest people in the room, making everyone else adjust to their rhythm instead. Looking back, Wayne's advice almost predicted the actor Caine would eventually become. Just as important, the conversation showed that John Wayne had taken the time to notice a younger performer entering Hollywood. To someone still establishing himself internationally, that acknowledgement carried tremendous meaning. Wayne had nothing real to gain by sharing his thoughts, and still he offered them, kinda freely. because seasoned pros usually know how much a small bit of guidance can turn into something huge over time. Caine kept repeating that story countless times because it stayed right there, equal parts usable, kind of sly, and also unmistakably true. Only John Wayne could take a few regular words and somehow make them feel like a lesson that sticks around for decades. Then, the second piece comes in, and honestly, it was even more surprising. John Wayne leaned in and warned Michael Caine not to wear suede shoes. For a second, Caine, so the tale goes, kept thinking, like maybe Wayne was about to mention some old Hollywood fashion rule he'd totally forgotten. But then Wayne explained it differently. Famous folks get spotted in odd places, like public restrooms. And if someone turned toward you at just the wrong moment, those nice suede shoes might not ever bounce back from that whole situation. The warning was rough around the edges, funny as anything, and honestly pretty practical too. It blew up the idea that Wayne only talked in big speeches, the kind made for the silver screen. No, here you had one of the biggest stars in the world talking like a veteran, trying to help a newcomer avoid an embarrassing mess. Under all the jokes, there was something deeper, quieter even. Celebrity removes ordinary privacy. People spot famous faces in airports, restaurants, hotels, and in a bunch of awkward seconds where nobody thinks they're being observed. Wayne understood success wasn't just red carpets, premieres, or applause. It also meant learning how to laugh at the strange little realities that follow you once you're recognized in public. And yeah, often in places you definitely didn't plan on. Which of these 5 relationships surprised you the most? Share your answer in the comments. Like the video, subscribe for more hidden stories from Hollywood's golden years, and watch the next video shown on your screen to discover another side of the stars you thought you already knew.